And I am convinced that if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer.
All right, let's get to work now. Our guest is senior writer for the Washington Examiner, specializing in defense and foreign policy, also a former U.S. Army officer. Welcome, Charles Hoskinson, to Midpoint. Charles, we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. We hear that in Iran they are dancing in the streets. Do they have reason to?
Well, it appears that Obama has bought himself a little bit of time against any efforts in Congress to impose new sanctions by convincing wavering Democrats that they are making progress in the talks. That's the good news. The bad news is that by releasing a fairly detailed framework of what has been agreed, now the world knows what kind of concessions the United States and its partners have made to get around to this point.
Is this just an administration that always, and this is not the first time we've heard that they put too much out there, they release too much information, that at times they are so impressed with themselves and wanting to make such a great PR plug with the American people that they basically do that. They throw too much out there, they reveal too much, and it damages our foreign policy right from the beginning.
Well, if you ask members of Congress, they've been fairly upset over the past few months, it seems, over the thought that the Iranian negotiators know more about what's going on than they do. And this is what has driven the efforts in Congress, not just for new sanctions, but also to force congressional approval of any deal. And this is something that when they come back from the Easter Passover recess, they're going to continue to proceed with.
I think the biggest thing here, and I wanted to get your take on this as well, is so much of this is based on trust and verify, if you will, a very old statement. But how indeed can anybody, it doesn't make a difference who you have trying to verify, trust the Iranian government? What have they given to America, Israel, the rest of the world at any point in the last 34 years to say, you can trust us?
Well, it appears that they have agreed to put their the bulk of their nuclear program on ice for 10 to 15 years. But you know, you have to remember that this whole thing started because they had violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This whole issue started because they could not be trusted on nuclear issues. So one of the huge questions hanging over this framework is what happens if they just decide to take it all off ice and go full out towards a nuclear weapon?
Well, isn't that something I think that probably they're going to talk about in Congress as everybody is tearing this apart? At one point, the president says they will never get a nuclear weapon, but then we're looking at 10 years and 15 years. It seems as if there was an awful lot of jumping around as far as the actual deadlines are concerned here that leave a lot of people wondering what is the real deadline. I imagine Congress is going to ask the same question.
It's very clear that the president has backed off things he said in the past. He said that there was no right for Iran to enrich uranium. Now they will clearly be allowed to enrich uranium. The UN Security Council resolutions that bar them from enriching will be repealed. He said that Iran will never get a nuclear bomb. Now the best we can hope for is that they'll be a year away from it if they decide to break out. This is clearly going to affect the debate in Congress.
Charles, let's go ahead about the minute we have left and talk about that. Congress is going to come back and they're going to look at this. What do you get as an original, as a first sense here? Is it going to be strictly along party lines when this vote actually does come out?
It will not be along party lines, but the key to watch will be the Democrats who were kind of in favor and now may be swayed by the administration's arguments that they have made progress, that they are close to a deal.
Is the president, you think, that good a salesman, especially knowing full well what happened between he and Netanyahu and what everybody already knows about Tehran?
Up to this point, he has not been. A lot of Democrats in Congress are very concerned about efforts to cut them out of any potential deal. And the framework notes that the U.S. sanctions architecture will remain in place, which essentially means that they're not going to ask Congress to repeal it. They're just going to waive it by executive order.
Thinking maybe that the president got had in this case?
It doesn't look like this will prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
And there, right there, I think is probably the most succinct point in all of this, because with all those dates thrown around, We don't really know at this point. Charles Hoskinson, pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Have a very happy holiday weekend.
Thanks for having me. You too.
Take care. Indianapolis, all-out damage control, a $4.4 billion tourism industry, and a little thing called the Final Four. We're on the ground in Indianapolis next.